Once upon a time, I woke up on a Tuesday, and then I realized it was a Wednesday, and then I realized I forgot to do a weekly update video. Let's do one. Hey everybody, welcome back to BellTube. I'm Brian Bell. It is the last week of December right now, and we are headed strongly into January of 2024. I'd like to wish everybody a happy holidays. I know my week has been kind of one of those weird ones. Like I mentioned in the opening, I kind of lose track of the days a little bit when these holidays fall on Mondays or Tuesdays or Fridays or really whatever. Holiday weeks in general just kind of mess up my daily schedule. So what did you guys do over the holidays? I know on Christmas Day itself, I was busy working on my other business, but the cool part is that Mike from Mike's Book Reviews put out almost like an audio book where he did 4 recordings, each about a half an hour long, of Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol. If you haven't already heard it, it's really good. I've been, as I've mentioned many times, a longtime viewer of Mike's channel, and I know that he gets asked all the time, why don't you be an Audible narrator? Well, I think it's a little bit more complicated than just deciding to be one, but he's really got a knack for it, I think. So if you're looking for a pretty short audiobook, it's only a couple hours, it's free on YouTube, and it's in 4 sections, about a half hour each. It's a great holiday thing. I'm really glad that Mike did it. Thank you, Mike, because it made my working on Christmas go a lot faster. So as far as what I'm reading right now, I am finishing up Eric Carter, book 9. I'm hoping to get that done today. And I'm also finishing up Cradle's book 10, which is called Reaper, hopefully today or tomorrow. And that's going to leave me about 5 days or so to do Hard Magic by Larry Correia and probably book 11 of Cradle. Because as you know, if you haven't seen it already, I'll pop a little thumbnail up here. So we're doing the great DNF challenge in January. And so I'm trying to get all the fun I can out of this last week of the year because I have a suspicion come January, it's going to be a little sketchy. It's going to be a little bit hit or miss. This week I also put out my Best of Urban Fantasy series. And there's 5 individual series that I put kind of across the line, going from hero all the way up to anti-hero, and a very crazy anti-hero at that, and everything kind of in between. The video went up over the holidays, so if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, you'll be able to find it on the BellTube channel. One thing that I will say is that I'm trying to experiment each video, doing a little bit something different, whether it be in editing or in the content itself. And for that particular video, I decided to throw some background music in, which I think worked better in my brain than it did in execution because the volume levels were kind of hot. They're kind of high on that. And I think it's a little bit distracting. But if you want to know my thoughts on urban fantasy, definitely check out what I put up earlier this week on 5 series that I think are great places to be if you're looking to get into urban fantasy. Also, I wanted to mention that as of filming this, we are less than 7 weeks old and we just crossed over the 750 subscriber count. If you've been here before and you haven't yet subscribed, please consider doing so. It does help the channel grow. I know you hear that on every YouTube video that you watch, but in this case, it really does. Why? Because as soon as we get to 1,000 subs, that means we are only 49,000 subs away from 50,000 subscribers. And that's a great community. So the first 1,000 is very important. Yeah, I like to think ahead. It's okay. It's okay to have big goals, right? I think so. And speaking of goals, I really don't have a set subscriber goal for the channel right now. I'm just kind of playing around. My biggest goal is to get 50 videos up in a reasonable period of time from the time that we started. Because I think that once you do something about 50 times, it becomes a little bit more natural. And I think that if we can make some incremental improvements in each video, by the time we get to our second set of 50, they're only going to get better. So while I joke quite a bit about, sub counts and all of that, what I'm really trying to do is get out quality content and quantity content as well. So not quantity just for the sake of putting up videos, but also making at least an incremental improvement as we go. And in some cases, like the urban fantasy video where I threw in some background music that really just didn't work the way that I hoped, it's a lesson learned, and so we can take that and apply it moving forward. A video that I've been asked to do since the very first week of BellTube is my top 10 fantasy series of all time. Good news, everyone.
Good news, everyone.
I'm actually going to do it, and it's going to drop this week. It's a really challenging list to do, mostly because a lot of the books on the list I read a long time ago. As I've mentioned on the channel before, I'm not a real big rereader. I know there's value in rereading, and I understand that we pick up new things, especially if we haven't read them in a long time. But there's just so many books out there that my reading voracious appetite wants to get to them. And I know locked away here somewhere in my brain that if I've read it before, I probably have bits and pieces of it, and I can go read something new. So doing this top 10 list is really an interesting challenge. There's probably going to be a little bit of recency bias, but not too much. As a matter of fact, I'm actually having a little bit of a trickier time ranking numbers 6 through 10 than I am 1 through 5, but I've got a day or two to sort that out, but that video will be dropping this week. One thing that I also want to mention is that in January, we've been lucky enough to be asked to appear on 3 separate BookTube channels at least. That number may go up as well. So the BellTube community is going to have a presence across a few other booktubers' content in the month of January, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Some of them are going to be live, some of them are going to be pre-recorded, but when that does happen, I'll make sure to let you guys know, and I would love it if the BellTube community showed up for other people's channels in force to let them know we have arrived. I'm not sure if I've mentioned it or not before, but I've been a video gamer my entire life. I really prefer RPGs and CRPGs over any other genre. And Starfield has been something that I've probably put about 100 hours into so far. And I'm happy to say I just finished the main story. I'm probably going to put the game down for a while. In terms of where I think it ranks within the Bethesda world of RPGs, it's not really at the top of the list. I don't even think it's the middle of the list. I think they had ambitious goals with Starfield. I'm not so sure they executed them right. Obviously, if I've got 100 hours into it, I had a good time, but there are some noticeable things about the Elder Scrolls franchise and the Fallout franchise that I just greatly prefer. I think that's a pretty common sentiment. They've talked about supporting Starfield for the next 5 years moving forward. To be honest, I've kind of had what I'm going to get out of Starfield. I really don't see myself picking it back up again, particularly because I've never played Baldur's Gate 3. Now, I own Baldur's Gate 3. I'm really excited to do it, but I also know that I have a very daunting TBR, the very famous DNF TBR coming up in January. So I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to get very much into Baldur's Gate 3 until February. But maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe this January TBR is not going to be as awful as I think it might be, and I'll be able to play a little Baldur's Gate 3. It won Game of the Year at the Video Game Awards. It's won pretty much everything that there is to win in the industry. And I love D&D. I like the 5e rule set. So I'm pretty excited to give Baldur's Gate 3 a play. And I suspect it'll be an even longer playthrough than Starfield was for me. I was a huge fan of Divinity Original Sin 2, which is made by the very same studio, Larian. If you're not into video games at all, that's okay. I understand. But I found that a lot of people that are into fantasy reading are also into gaming. So there's a little bit of crossover here. If you like that type of content, please leave a comment below. Another thing I want to talk about comments is I've noticed that overnight, I'm in the Midwest, I'm in Minnesota, and I've noticed that overnight, we tend to pick up a lot of subscribers and a lot of comments, and that leads me to believe that either some of you are very much night owls, or you live somewhere outside of the United States. Would you throw below in the comments if you get a chance where you're from? I'd love to know. Of course, we got to do a quick one for the road today, and today's one for the road is something that I learned in a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. I know I've mentioned that book before, but he talks about when we're trying to get a habit ingrained in ourselves to make it obvious. Now, what does he mean by that? How I take it is that A visual cue for me makes it obvious. For example, if I want to do a video, which is Wednesday morning today when I'm shooting this, sometime on Tuesday, I'm going to throw a post-it note somewhere where I cannot miss it. It might be in the bathroom mirror, it might be right on my refrigerator door, but there's something that is so obvious that I can't miss reminding me to get it done. And that doesn't need to be for work. It can be for really anything. It could be social, it could be physical fitness, it could be time for meditation, it could be really whatever your personal goals are. But making the cues really obvious and right in front of us, I think just makes life go a little bit simpler, and it can keep us on the train of accumulating and compounding one good habit after the next. That's our video for today. Don't forget to tune in later this week when I do my top 10 all-time fantasy series. And here's your fortune.